Okay, hello, those who are on Facebook. If you can hear me, just say hi so that we know that everything's good. Belinda is here. Hi, Belinda. Kai-Ying. Esme is also here. Hi, Esme. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, just say yes. Okay,
Just
can you hear? Can you hear Mr. Justin?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay, looks good. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us today. This is our second episode of Live, Love, and Lipidemia. I just named it actually after the first session with Jocelyn last week. So why am I even doing something like this? It's because as a student, I really struggled in pharmacy school. And there are always two parts to success as a student. One is the technical knowledge that you're going to gain. And the second thing is motivation. So I struggled very hard as a student. So I know that it's really difficult, really challenging to be a student studying pharmacotherapy. So I managed to get through because I had very supportive friends and very supportive mentors who, despite my lack of willingness to put in extra effort to study, they still took care of me, they still listened to me, they still bothered to give me extra classes so that I could succeed. And they supported me all the way. So I set up this entire group just because I wanted to support you guys and to give you a place where you can ask questions, and not just pharmacotherapy questions, but in conversations like we are having today, stuff that are non-pharmacotherapy. So you understand a bit about the industry, a bit about life, and let's see where this thing takes us today. So today we have Mr. Justin, who is very nice, who has to take his time off on a Sunday afternoon to come and chat with us. Is it raining at your place?
Yeah, it's still drizzling.
It's drizzling?
Yep.
Oh, in my place, it's like a freaking thunderstorm going on right now.
Probably
Yeah.
he left from my area to your area.
Yeah, so I've been training this particular program with Mr. Justin for about 2 years, is it? About 2 years plus? Yeah, so I've been teaching it for about 4 years, 5 years. Mr. Justin joined us about 2 years ago. And he's really one of the nicest people around because he's always very willing to help, always very willing to share advice, work together. And, even when I attended his lectures over the past few days and few weeks where we had to hold everything online, right? I was able to grasp what he was trying to teach. And one of the things that I noticed is he really cares for his students. So I'm very grateful to have Mr. Justin here today. The second reason is because, it's really hard to get people to agree to come on and have a chat with you, especially when, honestly, I have nothing to offer any of these people that we are speaking to, right? And you would be surprised at the number of people who rejected me before Mr. Justin said yes. And when I shared the idea with Mr. Justin, within minutes, he was like, "Yeah, okay, sure. What are we going to talk about?" Right. So I'm very thankful. So Justin, thank you for being here.
Hey, pleasure's all mine. Pleasure's all mine. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for your kind words also.
Yeah, of course. I think in our industry, it's important that we keep learning, and we keep learning from
Totally
each
agree.
other. So let's share with everyone who's here. Vanaja is here listening as well.
Okay.
Yes. So how do you even get into pharmacy?
Okay, so I think this is probably a little known fact, but my father used to work in the pharmaceutical line. Okay, he was actually in the old HSA. Last time it was known as I think pharmaceutical department or something like that. Okay, under MOH. Okay, so he was one of those individuals that do preparation. So he last time, right, in Singapore, we make our own syrup. Okay, so he was one of those the people behind the scene making the syrups. So I had a little foray with pharmacy. Okay, by then, and then our family friend is actually Mr. Sia. So I knew him since he was really back in those days. So that was like in the 1989.
Who's Mr. Sia?
Mr. Sia. Okay, so Mr. Sia is this uh, person in HSA. He actually is in charge of audits and licensing. So he's a very prominent figure in HSA in terms of auditing, both locally and globally. Also, I would say, yeah. So very nice guy, and that's how I also knew his wife, who happens to be Prof. Chan Lai Wah. So I knew them since late 80s, 90s. So it was quite interesting that in the end, right, after when I was finishing my A levels, okay, and then I decided, I told my parents that, why not just put pharmacy? Of course, my first choice was medicine, second choice was pharmacy, but because my love for helping people, and of course in the healthcare line is already there already, so it doesn't matter which one I go to. So in the end, I landed up in pharmacy, and it was a pleasant surprise to see all my family friends again. So like Prof. Chan actually took me from year 2 onwards, and then for microbe, and then can be quite interesting also during lectures also. So it's like I remember on the first day of lecture in class, she was saying, I know one person in class, and then everyone was like, who, and then she started telling me them about my childhood stories, and then it's like, okay, enough. Yeah, so yeah. Yep. So that was how I got into pharmacy, I would say.
Okay. Well, one thing that you mentioned, which I noticed earlier, is that pharmacy actually wasn't your first choice, right? And that's quite. I don't know if it's very common now, but during my time, it was a pretty significant number of people who actually wanted to study something else, and they ended up having to study pharmacy. Eventually, they grew into the job. Some of them are still practicing clinically at a very, very high level, I must say, at this point. So I'm pretty sure that for our students, there are a number of people who are not exactly doing what they wanted to do initially. How should they think about this? What should the thought process like in terms of coping with something so rigorous? Because if you enjoy something, it is easier to master the skill and to spend time learning it. But if you don't enjoy it, it can be pretty painful. So how do you cope? One of the things that I was chatting with Mr. Justin about was pharmacy wasn't his first choice. And for a lot of us, well, for me, it was my first choice. So initially when I was in school, it wasn't as easy for me to understand that. But many of my friends, pharmacy was not their first choice, just like for how some of our classmates and some of our students, pharmacy wasn't their first choice. So how should a student go about thinking about something like this?
So I need to take on where Sean has left. I think number one was the coping mechanisms, right? So pharmacy wasn't my first choice, it was actually my second choice. But because I already like healthcare in general, so in terms of your attitude towards it, right, I think it shouldn't change, because ultimately it's still your choice. Okay, definitely there were some thought processes on why you actually put it as whichever ranking of the choices that you made. Okay, that being said, I think when we run through the whole degree system, the course, okay, the course itself is really very rigorous. Okay, so you have multiple modules. I think there were modules that I really struggle a lot, things like pharmacology, because that was actually very memory based, and I'm not good with memory. Okay, and then there were some other modules that, of course, I'm actually quite strong in chemistry. So the chemistry related modules, I was actually a little bit more, I would say, competent. Okay, so at the end of the day, the grades doesn't really matter, truth be told, because once you go out, you notice that everything comes with practice. So you need to have your foray into the hands-on. So once you do the hands-on, you do in, day out, that is where you start to be more competent. So my advice to you all would be just to take it as a stride, and then when you look back, right, as what Steve Jobs said, the dots will connect naturally. Okay, so I believe in that philosophy a lot, because now we don't have the benefit of foresight. Okay, so I can't predict what will happen, but when you're going through and as you are taking the journey, you look back and you notice that the dots will connect, and it's always mentioned that hindsight is always 2020. So that's my advice to you.
Very, very nice. Well, Don actually asked, Justin, what was your first choice?
Oh, my first choice was actually medicine.
Okay. So Don, Mr. Justin's first choice was actually medicine. Yeah, right. It's pretty common for pharmacy. It's pretty common. Yeah, I think even Mr. Justin's time and my time. Mr. Justin is my senior.
Yep.
By how many years?
Should be 3 years because I graduated in 07.
3 years. Okay. Yeah, because I graduated in 2010.
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, why did you decide to come into teaching? Because most people are comfortable practicing. Why do you decide to come into teaching?
Okay, so teaching didn't come naturally, I would say. But maybe if I look back, I have always been involved in giving tuition, so it's probably a natural progression. What actually happened was when I was in so after I graduated, I worked in the hospital, and in the hospital, right, I was given an opportunity to so-called teach or the in-house version of the CPTC. Okay, so we run programs, and I was given certain modules to actually help to mentor or to teach. So I remember I was handling like antidepressants. Okay, and then later on, they also gave me poly interns. Okay, so these poly interns are from the diploma of pharmaceutical science. So when they graduate, right, they will be pharmacy technicians. So I had to so-called teach little modules to them and also mentor them and also help to guide their project. So after 3 years in the hospital, I went to a pharma industry. So I was actually in this very small company called Far East Drug. Okay, they basically handle mainly the health supplements. So like things like Obimin and that for that particular role, I was handling regulatory. So under regulatory portfolio, so they also put teaching and training under that portfolio. So I was also still teaching and training. But this time you notice that since the hospital team, I started to teach or mentor adults. So that is actually the start of adult learning or adult teaching. Okay, so after I left that, I went to a small little business with a friend, and that was when I started to have this new gig. Okay, so it so happened that I saw one of my ex-colleague from the hospital in the road, and I was asking the person, hey, what are you doing? Because I noticed that she actually posted some stuff about teaching, and so I asked her, okay, why not I just give teaching a try? And that was the start of the journey into teaching already. And then, of course, there was this opportunity. I was actually really very keen about the CPTC course, but I didn't go about doing it until there was an opportunity, and they told us that you need to get the AFTER certified. And then that was actually the impetus for me to get the AFTER cert and then to start to coach the CPTC course. And that was how 2 years ago started.
Okay. Well, you do have experience in now coaching young students, those who are in the poly, as well as adult learners, which are people who, like most of our students, they have to go to work, and then in the evening they got to come for class, and they have to juggle so many other things, right? They have family, they have, other burdens and other commitments that the young kids typically don't have. What do you see as the main difference in these two groups of students that you coach or teach?
Okay. So in terms of pedagogy, right, which is the way of teaching, to teach students and to teach adult learners is totally different. It's actually more in terms of the motivation and also their prior knowledge. So for students, they come with zero prior knowledge, and their motivation is really more didactic, meaning that we engage them. Whereas when you progress into adult learners, right, adult learners are very, very motivated. They come to a course, right, with an objective of really getting a cert or to achieve the objective of the course.
We were chatting about the difference between adult and the young poly kid learners.
Yeah.
Correct. And you say that the adult learners were generally a bit more motivated because they come for the purpose of a certification, right?
Yes. So they have an objective in mind. I mean, not saying that our students don't have the objective. Their main objective is really to get the diploma. But I think our students, our adult learners' objectives are even more pronounced because it will have a direct impact on them, especially in terms of their job. Okay. So I noticed that they are number one, very, very motivated. Number two, I like the fact that they have prior knowledge. Okay, because that is where I can tap on them. So when I mention something, I would like to throw to them and say, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Whereas for the student learners, right, you really have to start from scratch. So there is some prior knowledge, but it's very minimal. But for adult learners, their prior knowledge is really very deep. And sometimes, right, I learn from them also. And that's something that I truly enjoy because the learning comes both ways, not only as a facilitator, okay, but also I also can learn from my students. There are different practices like in the clinic settings, what do they use, what do they practice, in the hospital, in the polytechnic, what do they use, what do they practice. So these are the little subtle differences, okay, in terms of the prior knowledge and in terms of the motivation that I feel. And do not disadvantage yourself just because you're an adult learner, especially in terms of age, whether in terms of your capacity to learn. Okay, your motivation is really something that drives you to learn. And I've seen a lot of adult learners at the beginning they feel that they are very disadvantaged, but at the end of the day they actually excel. Okay, it's about the mentality behind it. If you want to do it, you put your whole heart and soul into it and you can achieve it.
And that's quite interesting because I think one thing that perhaps me and Justin and we are not afraid to admit is our prior experience is not in the clinics, not in the GP clinics. Our prior experience are in pharmacies, in hospital pharmacies. Mr. Justin has experience in the industry, but it is not in the clinics. And we actually learn a lot about the practices that happen in a GP clinic, in a specialist clinic from our students. Well, Justin, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that adult learners have prior knowledge, but sometimes that prior knowledge actually takes time to accumulate. And there are a number of our learners, I'm sure you've experienced, we've taught this class so many times. Some of them will say, I never studied for 20 years, 30 years. Wow, I so old already. How to remember so many new things? All these words, my English so bad. These are very common things that we hear for our students. So,
Right.
so how should they cope with something like that? If this is, some of the thoughts that they have.
Okay, so all these little thoughts, right? Like 20 years, 30 years ago, I last picked up the book and so on and so forth. The names are very big. These are all physical barriers that you put upon yourself. Okay, you need to let go. Okay, you need to have an open mind and an open heart to accept. Okay, yes, at the beginning, it's really very difficult. Okay, example I give to myself is actually last year I tried to learn the piano. So it's like learning to read all the Taoye words and things like this. It's really, really very challenging. But you have to put your heart and mind into it. Okay. I think one of the biggest struggle that I have, right, is the left hand and right hand coordination. So I keep on telling myself, right, I cannot do it. I cannot do it. But you keep on practicing. And as you practice, right, I notice, actually I can do it. Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's really about your mentality. You have to tell yourself that you can do it. The positive mentality will build on it, and then you will do it.
Yeah, and one of the things that both Mr. Justin and I are very committed to doing is to really support you in this journey. I mean, we've all been through it. It's not easy. But if you have anything, we've always said, just feel free to reach out to us, and we're just very, very happy to help you along the way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. I'll come back. And don't worry, you didn't miss out anything. Okay. Justin, you were saying.
Yeah. Okay. So I was actually building out on what actually Mr. Chong was mentioning. So he said that I think in the course of all the lectures that we have delivered and things like this, right, we did mention that if there's anything that you feel that you have difficulty, right, please feel free to approach us because we really want you all to learn. And because you are in this course already, we can see your motivation, and that actually motivates us to actually give or come out from what we are committed to do to help you as much as possible. I think this whole session is also the brainchild of Mr. Chong because of the very fact that he see the commitment and motivation in you all, that you all want to know and you all want to learn more. So that's why he actually craft this out.
Oh, yes, thanks. Okay, so all right, Justin, one of the things that you discussed earlier is that you actually work in industry before.
Mhm.
In the industry, are there any roles that a PT can take, or perhaps someone who graduates from our program can take?
Okay, so if you look at the industry, right, what are the roles that are available? Okay, I think one of the biggest role, right, you can see that's available is actually sales and marketing. So those who are in, especially the clinics, you'll probably see them. Okay, the sales and marketing people. So there will be like your sales rep, your marketing reps, and so on and so forth. So that's actually a big position that any one of us can actually take. Okay, be it you are a CPTC graduate, poly graduate, or even a pharmacy graduate, because they don't look in terms of your qualification, but they look in terms of the skill sets, okay, and especially your experience also. So those of you who are actually working in a polyclinic, in the GP clinics, right, actually the experience you'll have, right, is really very useful, especially for the industry setting. Okay, next we have the regulatory role. So regulatory roles actually is more in terms of being the middle person between the pharma company who wants to register or market a particular product with the authority which has name. So this kind of role again, you do not need to have high qualifications. What you do need to have is actually a very meticulous nature, which being in healthcare or being in like clinics and hospital setting, right, we already do possess already, and you are more familiar with all the drug jargons and the medical jargon, so it makes performing that role really very easy. Okay, versus someone who has an arts degree or a business degree, because that particular position also do not really need any kind of pharmacy related qualification. But what puts you at the edge over them is actually your background and your studies. Okay. Next, we have your pharmacovigilance. Okay, which is mainly in terms of monitoring adverse events and so on and so forth. So that one in terms of the qualification one is quite similar to what is expected for the regulatory role. So these are actually the three big roles that I feel that even as a CPTC graduate, you can explore also.
Okay, so it means that a person who graduates from this program doesn't actually have to only do a role that's clinical. Of course, we train them to be clinical,
Yes,
because
correct.
that's the nature of our program, but there are actually other options for them out there in the industry as well.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. When we talk about education, there are two ways to become a pharmacy technician in Singapore, right? One is to go through a poly course for 3 years, and the other is to go through our program. Our program is 9 months. The poly students program is actually 3 years. What actually is the difference, you think, between these two programs, and are our students disadvantaged because it's 9 months?
Okay, so I think you have to go down to the fact that the students, right, when they go through the diploma program, right, they are actually student or young learners, versus the CPTC program is actually meant for adults. So that's one very big differentiating factor in terms of your prior knowledge, your work experience. Because for CPTC program, we do value that, and if you notice, right, that for one of the enrollment criteria for CPTC is actually work experience in a relevant healthcare field. Whereas for the diploma, okay, you don't need any relevant experience. They look at your O-level results for enrollment into the particular course, and then that is where we will train you. So that's the biggest difference that I feel in terms of the program wise. So you might say that the program for CPTC is disadvantaged, but because we build a lot upon prior knowledge, because you are adult learners and you already have the experience of about at least 2 to 3 years already. So there are certain things that we don't need to cover. It's mainly just tapping on your experience, on what you have learned and what you know already, and then building up on that, versus the poly program, which is really totally zero knowledge for majority of them, and that is when we start to impart the knowledge. So that's why you can see that there is some form of disparity in terms of the time or the duration.
So let's talk about CPTC right now.
Yes.
Okay. Because of the situation that we are in, the assessment has been postponed.
Okay.
Right. So it means that this is not typical, because normally after the revision, within like a couple days, less than a week, the students are going to clear their clinical workbook. They're going straight for the assessment. So everything is very fresh in the mind.
Yes, correct.
But this is not the case right now.
Yep, correct.
So how should the students prepare? Because 1 month away, it's not easy. The sheer amount of information, and not to mention, it is also in the midst of a new module, if I understand correctly, correct?
Yes,
That's
will be.
AC9, right? So which means in the middle of AC9, you have to take AC7 and AC8 assessment. Holy crap! How should a student cope with something like that?
Correct. Okay, so I think more importantly, right? I think do not overwhelm yourself. I know it sounds overwhelming, okay, but that being said, I think you have to look at the. I mean, this is really unprecedented times. We hope that everything can be as per normal. Unfortunately, not. So the physicals, like practicals and the WAs, all have to be postponed. Okay, but the silver lining is that you have more time to practice. You have more time for revision. So do value this time, especially for some of us who have more opportunities to actually stay at home. So this is actually good time for you to polish up, brush up, all the misconceptions, or I think things that you are not so clear and not so familiar with. Okay, I think a very good example would be the calculations. I think everybody all falter in the calculation. So you have these good 6 weeks now before WA. Go and practice more on the calculations, revisit, try to understand the principles behind or what's the thought process behind all these calculations, so you can actually brush up yourself. And at the end, when you start to take your WA, you notice that, hey, actually we are more confident. Okay, you'll be able to do the WA more competently, and also even for the final assessment, which is all going to be your role play. So the prescription processing and the self-medication. Okay, take this opportunity also to observe, okay, especially because most of you are going to be working in the clinics and in the hospital, to observe how the processing of prescription is being done, how the dispensing is being done. So you have more time now to actually do all this. So that's why I give this advice to you all, okay, especially when the day when the circuit breaker was extended, that you have more time now to do your revision, and constant revision is actually very useful. Okay, continue to do your continual revision so that at least you'll not be caught at the end of the day in a surprise, or you say, oh yeah, totally forget. Okay, this is actually a good opportunity for you to build out on whatever that you are so-called lagging behind, or you're not so confident.
Well, speaking about circuit breaker, this is the first time we're actually conducting a class like online. Yeah, do you think this is a method for the future?
Actually, right, we had some thoughts, especially even for my poly. I think this is really a potential way that we can conduct lectures, right? Because you see, if you most of the adult learning classes are all done after office hours. Okay, and after office hours, everybody is tired. Everybody have all their commitments. Some of us are actually from very far away places, so to congregate at a certain place, right, might not be that convenient and things like this. Okay, whereas this online platform actually gives you the opportunity, right, to relax a little bit after the end of the day, and to receive to view this content and to learn. And I feel that this platform also, right, actually seems to be a little bit more encouraging, especially if you're familiar with the platform. Okay,
What do you mean is more encouraging?
It's more encouraging in terms of like questions being asked. I think people are more willing to ask questions, especially those who are on the shy side, because you have the platform where you can type your questions. I mean, those who are not very comfortable to voice out their questions. Okay, so this is something that I'm beginning to notice also, not only here but in some other sessions.
Yeah, and it's true because sometimes when we teach classes, right, not everyone actually has the courage to ask questions. Although we definitely encourage that, because if you have the question, somebody else also has the same question.
Yep.
So there's actually no harm asking those questions.
Yep. Correct.
Okay. I've just a few more questions before we don't take up too much of your time anymore. We've been teaching this a number of times. What would you consider to be your favorite type of CPTC students? Don't need to name anybody. What's your favorite kind of learner?
Okay, so I think maybe I can say for the rest, I think my favorite type of learners are learners who are very motivated, who ask questions, and who want to learn. Okay, so I think so far all the batches that I have taught, I really enjoy all the learners because every learner is really very motivated and really very willing to learn, and you can see that. Especially, okay, like what I mentioned, even for this platform also, right, I noticed that when students are a bit lost, right, they will tell me, say, sure, can you slow down? Can you revisit? And I'm okay to revisit it because if we revisit it, everybody learns again. Okay, if we revisit, everybody can see the question again. Okay, so that's what I like about these these kind of opportunities. Okay, so that is actually my favorite type of learners. Okay, someone who is open, motivated, willing to learn, willing to see that there are other possibilities. So I remember going through the calculation questions, and there were some students that were questioning, sure, so is this way of calculating also correct? Remember, to reach your final answer, right, there can be many routes. So I always tell them, say, at the end of the day, it is the rationale behind how you do the process, and then getting the final answer. That's the most important process. How you do it, okay, whether is there any right way, there's always many different ways you can arrive at the answer.
But the logic has to be right, because if not, when the scenario changes, it becomes very difficult to apply the concepts.
Yes.
And of course, in an exam like what we are conducting, okay, I shouldn't be saying this, but sometimes you can throw a dice and you have MCQ. But when you have a patient who's in front of you, you can't do that anymore. You can't take that kind of risk anymore.
Yep. Correct.
So just now I asked you about your favorite type of CPTC students. Now I'm going to put you on the spot a bit. I'm going to ask you, what kind of CPTC students that you find most challenging?
Correct. I think challenging is actually the correct word. Okay. So the challenging types of CPTC students are those, right, that actually have a so-called preconceived idea. So what do I mean by preconceived idea? So I understand that in your clinic setting, right, you have a certain way of doing things. But when you come for this course, right, we are not assessing you in terms of what is being done in your clinic. So we have to assess you according to what we have taught you. So the most challenging one will be students, right, that will keep on saying, no, my clinic, you already do this already. And then I tell you, now I'm assessing you. I'm assessing you not based on your clinic's assessment, but based on what is the competencies standards. Okay, so for this moment, I need you to forget what your clinic is doing. Okay, you just remember what we are assessing you. After that, right, then you can revert back to your clinic setting.
What are the practices they are doing in their clinics wrong? How come it is so different from what we are teaching? Okay. If it is different.
Okay. So difference is not wrong. It's just that they have another different way of doing it. Okay. So it comes from the fact of maybe a clinical experience. So based on the doctor's clinical experience or based on the clinic's clinical experience, right, they will do this particular way. Okay. Whereas for us, right, we base on the more general experience, which is always the other way. So that is the little so-called differences or subtle differences that we will observe. It doesn't mean that the clinic is wrong. It actually has a rationale behind how they are practicing certain kinds of procedures or practices.
Mm. And so how was that student? Did she manage to clear, or did he manage to clear?
Okay, so once the student actually comprehend that, yes, because this is the assessment, then of course the student actually managed to clear.
Which is of course great news, right? I think one of the things that that students or learners don't always realize is that it doesn't give us any pleasure to fail anybody. You know, there is no thrill in doing that, because our job as trainers really is to help you acquire the competencies so that you can go out there to serve your patients, right, and in the safest way possible. So it's really not an easy decision. And for those of you who might not be aware, it's sometimes we even have to talk to each other and say, should we do this or should we not do this? And it's not an easy thing for any trainer to have to do. Okay.
I have to add on to that, and the rationale is actually because once you all pass out from this CPTC course, right, it means that we have deemed you all competent to actually dispense safely. So if anything happens, right, actually they will go back to us and say, is this student or is this person really competent in terms of the safety aspect? So we have to bear that in mind that when we pass a student, or when we want to certify a student competent, have they passed the barest minimum in terms of dispensing and providing healthcare advice as safely as possible? Because at the end of the day, right, it's about doing this as safely as possible so that the patient can take the medication safely and can recover.
Okay. That's very true, because at the end, we are doing all of this for our patients, right?
Yeah. It's not for us.
It's really not for us.
It's not like we have a quota to fail people.
Okay. And final question for you before we wrap up this entire chit chat session.
Yes.
Is it true that if a learner gets a certain assessor, it is easier to pass? Because I'm sure I have a certain reputation among our students, and the news passes along, right? Oh, Mr. Sean very strict, something like that. What do you think? Is it true that it is more difficult for a learner to pass if they are assigned a certain assessor?
I think that is totally not true, because every assessor, right, we have our rubrics, okay, and the rubrics actually sets the benchmark in terms whether a student, right, should be competent or not, and every one of us are following that rubric. So that's what I need to say. Okay, there's no particular assessor that that's too strict or very lenient, but based on the rubrics, we assess the student, and if the student is able to show competency in that particular section of the rubrics, then yes, we are willing to let the student be certified competent. But if the student under the rubrics is still not yet or doesn't display competency in that particular section, then we will have to make that painful decision, because at the end of the day, it's still about safety to the patient. And I confident enough to let that particular student to dispense his first medication safely or not, if I pass that particular student or certify that student competent. I think that's is at the back of everybody's mind when we do the final assessment.
Okay, thank you. Wow, what a chat with Justin. I think we've covered quite a number of points. We will be putting together all these little snippets of video so that for those of you who are not able to join us live, you can actually watch the full video without all the interruptions. Right. So Justin, before we let you go, any final thoughts, any final words, anything you would like to share with our students who might be listening?
Okay, I think everybody is actually very worried about WA and especially finance assessment since because it's being delayed. Okay, my assurance to you all, if you all feel that you all need any kind of support, feel free to approach any one of us. I think we are more than willing to help you all in whatever capacity that we can. Continue to revise, continue to have that drive and that motivation. We are already at our final last track already. So AC7, AC8 is going to be completed. Okay, and then the very last module, AC9. Once you are done with AC9, that's it. You're already done with this whole CPTC. And I'm really awaiting for that moment. Okay,
yeah,
and of course to continue to stay safe.
Yeah, and for all of us as trainers, we really look forward to the day when we go down to the pharmacy or go to your clinic, and we know that when we look at you and we see you work, we know that you are doing your best for your patients. At the end of the day, it's really not so much about you, it's more about your patients. And at the end of the day, we are all colleagues working for the same cause.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. All right. So, okay. Thank you, Justin.
Yep.
We will catch up again. And for all our students, keep revising. Any questions, feel free to ask us. We are there for you, and we are here to make sure that you are successful. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.